let's get started. Whew, I'm already excited, Richard. Like, the moment Sangeeta told me that I'll be like hosting Richard Millington, I was like, damn, I'm not going to miss this chance forever. Why will I?
I'm flattered, but I don't think I deserve it. But thank you anyway.
No. Every single one of us over here, we take FeverBee's resources as our, I would have also written somewhere that it's like a Bible or a go-to place for me. Whenever I'm in doubt, I'm stuck, I go there. That's there for sure. So I'm going to give a very one proper introduction and one cheesy introduction so that we are going to have our conversation flowing, right? So, and since you are more into data and numbers, so something that I saw where Akash had shared with me in your bio section, it kind of like, boom, it made me like, and I wanted to tell it to others as well, which is like, you have been helping 310 plus organizations in terms of building their communities. Oh my God. I mean, it's not an easy number. It's like your whole lifetime has gone over there. And you've also helped 1,250 members to basically excel in becoming a community professional through your academy, Community Management Academy. So that's amazing, Richard. Like, how did you manage to do 13 years? My God.
I mean, it's a high number, but it's a high number since 2008 when I first began doing this. So that's like 14 years ago. So when you do like 10, 15 clients a year, or even more than that, like recently it's more than that, then you get up to that number quite quickly. So it sounds impressive, but for a lot of the time, it's like, and a couple of new clients a month, and then you gradually get to that level. I think what's changed recently is that the caliber of clients that we're working with, I mean, I'm so lucky. Like my team gets to work with Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, SAP, like the really top brands in the world. And that's really exciting to be doing. The Academy I launched in 2011. And so since then, maybe 100, 200 people a year, sometimes more, sometimes less have gone through that. So it's a high number, but when you think about the whole span of how long it's been around, it kind of makes sense. But for me, communities are a lot like a puzzle. Like I think it's great when you have a community that has a very strong sense of community. But for me, it's like a puzzle, and solving that puzzle is a really exciting thing to be doing, because you need the technology in place, you need the psychology principles to be in place, you need the strategy to all kind of combine and connect. And that's such an exciting thing to be doing. And so working with a client and figuring out, using the data to figure out what's working, what's not working, and putting the right things in place, to me, that's what really drives me. It's what drives the team I have now. So yeah, it's exciting work to be doing, and I feel very lucky to be doing it.
So officially, should I call you Sherlock Holmes of community then?
I wouldn't ascribe that to myself. I'm flattered again, but I just like doing the analysis, figure out what's working, what's not working, and making recommendations to manage.
Understood. Now comes the cheesy part of the introduction. So please bear with me if this gets too cheesy. So people may call you Richard, and we would love to call you a data wizard. So we are very happy to welcome you for this conversation, Richard. So did you like this cheesy intro, or was it like?
If it works for you, it works for me. I'm just happy to be here and speak to you folks. What I have noticed over the last 3 years especially is that people from India, I've found more people from India that are following the blog. There's more groups and platforms, and it feels like the community scene there is exploding so quickly, and it's so exciting to see it. It's so exciting to see new voices on Twitter that are coming through now. And so for a long time, it is mostly people in especially like the UK and North America that were kind of had this like hold on the community space, and it's exciting to see new voices that are coming through. And India for me is the biggest source of new voices, new ideas, and so that's exciting to see.
Oh yeah, we are very happy that you mentioned about Indian community manager ecosystem as well. Yes, it is like tremendously growing over here. So Richard, I was thinking when we are going to come and then have a conversation, I was thinking let's divide this into two sections. Like one is like a warm-up kind of a session. The other one is like where we are going to do a powerlifting session, right? So I'm going to have like 3 quick questions to you. Akash, I will need your help over here, okay? Like the first question is that if we have just only 60 seconds in the world, like we just imagine there's just 60 seconds in the world, what would be your answer for who is Richard Millington and what is FeverBee? We just have 30 seconds each. I'm so sorry. Time is so less.
FeverBee is a consultancy that helps great organizations build thriving communities by combining the psychology, the technology, and the strategy. That's the core of what FeverBee does. I am someone that leads a company and tries to make us more data-driven, bring a better understanding of psychology into how we build communities, and make communities as much of a science, perhaps, as it could possibly be. I think that'd be the very quick summary. I mean, maybe it's an egotistical thing, but I think that's probably what I try to do, with mixed success at times, to be honest.
Right, science. That's interesting. I would also say even there is a bit of art involved over here.
Absolutely.
With people in and emotions flowing in, so obviously art part is also there. So there is one more question, which is like, I've termed it as 1:3. Okay, so we have, what is that one thing that turned you to be a community professional? And the 3 side of it is, tell me some 3 most adventurous things that you did around community building for the past 13 years to 14 years.
So the first question is, why did I choose this job? Is that the question?
Yep.
Gaming. Like a lot of people in the community space came into it through video games initially. And video games are so far advanced in so many ways. They're using the technologies that they're using today are technologies we're going to be using tomorrow. And so I got into gaming and the online community scene around gaming, and it all kind of grew and developed from there. If I were to pick some significant milestones along that journey here, I don't know about the most wild things I've done, but I think the milestones that really occurred to me is, one, I did an internship in 2008 with Seth Godin, who you might know, a very well-known marketer. So in New York, I worked with him for a couple of months, and that really helped guide me in the approach to building communities from the really pragmatic, practical sense. A lot of people, they come up with these grand plans for a community, but Seth was very much, you were the first 10 people that you're going to approach. What will you tell them? How will they react? And really getting these micro things accurate, and then you can build everything else from there. The second big milestone was probably looking at the psychology, really understanding the psychology of how members engaged. There was a lot that's happening around 2013 or so, where a lot of what was being recommended just didn't work. How we welcome a newcomer wasn't working, and when I was finding client after client, they were following advice that wasn't working. And when we began really trying to understand the psychology of what really motivates people within a community, actually doing survey after survey after survey and getting those results, it was very clear that the practices that are being followed and the practices that work are very different things, and we need to get those practices right. I think the third thing is probably the data side. Back in 2017 or so, I took a real deep dive into understanding the statistics, data and analysis, and these kind of things, to really be able to build models, to bring in different data. Doing a course like this really helped to do that. So now we're able to build a model and see if that model works or not, and then see what kind of practice makes sense or not. And I think that's been a game changer, because I think we're so much more data driven now, and the level of insights that I think we're able to get from a community is nowhere near the level of insights that most people are getting from a community. And too often we rely upon the platform vendors, the Google Analytics and whatnot, and there's nowhere near the level of data you need from that. But when you can segment your community apart and look to see how different categories are performing against each other, how different groups of people are behaving, when you have that level of depth, then you can design really specific interventions to make the community dramatically increase activity. And if you look at some of the case studies we've posted over the last 6 months or so, it's always data driven. It's always, this is what the data said, this is what we thought would work, and this is whether it worked or not. And that kind of scientific approach has really been a game changer. So yeah, there's been some like crazy community stuff I've done over the years, but I think those are the big milestones that I've seen in my career so far.
I do get the analogy of when you said that, you like puzzle, and then when you were talking about the data backed decisions, like I can see how you like to connect dots to basically create a pattern. It's amazing, Richard. So there is one last fun question to you, which is, if you haven't been a community leader, what would be your alternative profession like? I'm like very eager to listen to this one.
I'm going to give you the nerdiest, dorky answer possible. I would love to be a historian. Like, genuinely, I find history absolutely fascinating. Most of the reading I do is like history books. Like, I absolutely fascinated by it. So the idea of looking into like stuff that's happened, drawing out insights, new ideas, maybe it's kind of similar at times, but that would be like my dream job. I know I should say something like more exciting, like a footballer or something like that, but no, historian would probably be, my alternative job.
Trust me, if you were a historian, I would definitely, a lot of people would start allowing history, because I'm sure you would again bring that, the quality of getting the data and then, joining that puzzle. So yeah, makes sense. So now that we are done with the, our warm-up session, let's get into the powerlifting session, Richard. Let's brace ourselves. So I'm going to ask you a question around community audit, and there are like 2 to 3 parts of this question. So I'm just starting with just first part. So how often do you think a community needs an audit?
Every 6 months to a year. I think that's a good time frame. A year is probably quite standard. We do that for some of our clients. We do an audit like every year. We update what's working, what's not working, what the new trends are. Really doing a deep dive into the analysis of community, doing walkthroughs. So once a year is usually a good standard. Some of the larger communities might do it more often than that.
Awesome. 6 months to 1 year. 1 year is a great time. So what parameters do you think, like, we know that there needs to be a community audit done, but, there should be certain parameters that will actually help us nail the audit better. So what would be those parameters?
I don't know about parameters, but I'll highlight what we typically do for a client, because I think that might help. So when we begin working with a community, either just on the analysis or doing the full strategy, we spend around 6 to maybe like 6 to 8 weeks on the discovery phase, as we call it. And during that phase, we interview all of the stakeholders involved with the community, understand, are they aligned in what the community wants and what the community needs? Do they understand what a community is? Identify any concerns, understand what they want, make sure it's aligned with the goals. That's one thing, the internal analysis of the organization. Make sure they have the right resources, all those kind of things are quite important. And then they have a shared common roadmap for what the community looks like. 2, we do an analysis of the audience. This is where it gets really interesting. That usually includes a survey identifying what kind of value they need from the community, where do they go to get that value at the moment, why do they go to those channels, really trying to gather feedback on what they like about the community, what they don't like. That's quite useful. We also do interviews with the members of that audience, and that comes in 2 forms. One is interviews just diving deeper into specifically what do they want. So it's one thing for someone to tell you, say I'm building a community for sales professionals, and someone says, oh, I want templates or resources that I can use. That's great, but in the interviews, you can be like, what kind of templates do you need? What format, what design, what style? You can go into a lot more depth, and that's really interesting. The other thing we do is usability testing on the site itself. So we have someone on Zoom. We'd like to do it in person, but Zoom is how we do it these days. And we go up to the community with a member of the audience, and we give them a task to do, usually the kind of task that people come to a community to do. And then we ask them to speak out loud what they're doing and why. And then we see what happens. And what we find when we do this is the most exciting part for me, is that they don't use the community the way most people think that they do. And they don't use the navigation menus that people think. They don't use, they don't browse most of the sections on the website. And so the usability testing is really important, because the insights you get from that are far better than anything else. There are tools that can help, like Hotjar especially, that can help, but it's nowhere near the same level of doing it yourself and getting people to think out loud about why they're doing it. We also do things like analyze the competition. So where else do people go to get that same value at the moment? What does the community do better? Is there clear positioning for that community? We benchmark the platform against our best practices, against their competition, to figure out exactly where the community is doing better and worse and where it needs to improve. And then we pull everything together. So all of the current trends of the audience, where everything is headed, like it's really detailed, specific personas, understanding exactly what people want and need. And then we build a strategy from that. Or ideally, we should build a strategy from that. Usually we build it as we're going along because clients don't have much time. But yeah, we build a strategy from that. But that's what the audit looks like. It has very specific phases that are in place. And once you have this level of data, it's so much easier to get the right responses. And the reason I think a lot of strategic efforts aren't as successful as they should be is that the level of data that they're relying upon isn't there. And so often they'll say, oh, the level of engagement in our community has dropped. Let's do more exciting things within the community itself. And that might work and it might not. What we'll do is we'll think, okay, the level of engagement has dropped. Let's figure out why. Are fewer people visiting that platform in the first place? If so, why? Has search traffic dropped? If so, why? And then you can go back to the very root cause. And often you can find that people are working so hard in the wrong direction because they're not solving the actual problem that they're trying to have. And so the discovery phase or the audit that we do is very much about that. Clear scoring, clear benchmarks, clear data that anyone can then use to build a strategy from. That was a long answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
I mean, like I hope the call is getting recorded because these points are like very, very important, auditing the community, and you've actually like broken it down pretty well for us. Richard, this brings me to ask you, another question as well. Like, we've been like noticing a couple of articles where you, like one of the webinars I attended was like, how do you triple the retention rates in community? And you were also recently talking about, what is wrong with the homepage community and how it was before and how it, what you basically made changes and how things actually happened after that, right? So I want to understand, like, what are the mistakes, that any person or any community builder should not be basically making while building a community? You could say something that's like top 3 or 5 that is very prone to happen.
Oh man, where do you begin with a question like that? I'll try and think of some of the most common. I mean, the most common for me is not getting anywhere near enough data to work from. So when people design a community, they manage a community, they look to other organizations to see what's working, what's not, and then they copy that. That's typically what they do. And that doesn't always work because the conditions are different. The size of the audience is different, the type of audience is different, the value is different, the platform is different. And so that usually doesn't work. So the common mistakes we see as a result of that is, one is not realizing what type of community they're managing. So I did a post about this on Monday, I think, if someone could put the link in. Not really understanding what type of community they're managing. If you're doing a community based around, say, customer support, that's completely different from doing a community where people are sharing best practices, or a close group of peers where you're collaborating, or a user group. We're still about connecting people, but the type of interactions are different. In a support community, people come, they ask a question, they get an answer, and then they leave. And that's great. They don't want to hang around with everyone else that can't fix the products that they're using. In a peer group, it's about sense of community, trust, ritual, and traditions, those kind of things. So not being clear on that is probably a major mistake. Other ones include designing the community wrong, selecting the wrong platform in the first place. Some platforms are great for some situations and not others. And platform vendors are very good at selling the platforms that they have. And often they sell you in the wrong one. As much as I like those guys, the salespeople have a job to do and they do it. When there is a platform, they configure it wrong. You often see a big banner that blocks out all of the content on the page of the community. That's a big mistake. The positioning of a community is often wrong. They don't position the community for unique value. Very often it makes more sense to call a customer support rep than it does to actually ask a question in a community, because you get a direct response just to you. Why would someone ask in a community? So getting the positioning of the community is quite critical. Super users, often people get the super user experience wrong. Instead of telling a story that people want to be a part of, that's exciting for them to be a part of, they rely upon swag, rewards, Amazon gift vouchers. It doesn't work well. I don't even know where to begin. There's so many mistakes that come up. Like, honestly, like almost every community, when you really dive into it and you evaluate it using actual data and best practices, there's so many improvements that can be made. And a lot of it is just not really, it's really hard to see a community that you've been working on for years through the eyes of someone that's just arrived. Like, it's really hard to see it through their eyes, put yourself in their shoes and really understand what they want and how they go about it. And if you can do that, it's a lot easier to solve a lot of the problems that are out there. So I think I covered some of the big ones, not all of them. I'm sure there's way more mistakes, both inside the community and internally, how we talk and report value, but those are probably some of the ones that come to mind right now.
Kind of like, it felt like you read my mind in most of the places, because I do agree with a lot of things where we often digress from what this community actually we would want to start it for, and specifically the position of community within your website or application, any ecosystem for that matter. Because I've seen a couple of them where they have a support community or education community where they place it, instead of under resources, they place it somewhere outside near login or under different section about us and things like that. And it kind of makes me think, okay, what is this community for? So I totally agree with you on those points, Richard. So other thing is that, I mean, like, I'm sure you must be like, I really want to understand this because I'm also trying to learn this Web3 community ecosystem, right? So now, what is your take on that Web3 community ecosystem? And do you think that what should actually the community managers or builders, do you think that they should be like really up for the next set of challenges that is actually coming up? Because I mean, this is my personal opinion. We ourselves as the community builders, we are trying to learn and unlearn a lot of things in this span, because the dynamics of consumer interactions in the digital world has totally changed in the past 2-3 years. And do you think that community builders will be able to offer it? So just wanted to know your thought around it.
Can you repeat the question perhaps? I'm just trying to make sure that I understand what you're asking.
Sure. So I just wanted to understand what is your take on the Web3 communities, and what community managers would basically have to upskill, or will have to be ready for the next set of challenges for the Web3 communities. What should they be basically doing, if at all?
Oh, so you're asking what is my take on the Web3 communities?
Yep.
Honestly, I don't have one. Some of it seems kind of interesting. Some of it seems a bit out there, to be honest. At the moment, as I understand, people are spending a lot of money to buy pictures of monkeys that they don't own. So some of it is good, some of it is interesting. I will say this, because I'm not an expert on Web3. I don't pretend to be. I think there's a lot of hype at the moment, and we don't know what's going to be important and what's not. And from my take, people are getting wrapped up in Web3 stuff, however they define that, when they haven't even got the basics of their community in place. If you don't have a super user program that's on fire, validated member personas, if you haven't designed your community experience to be optimized as best it possibly can, if you don't have a playbook that's in place, you shouldn't even be thinking about Web3 at the moment. It's like going back 5 years ago and saying, well, QR codes could be like a big thing. What should we do? You're like, nothing, honestly. I mean, I don't, put it this way, I can't see an immediate value to members by adopting Web3 at the moment. I can see a lot of value for people saying it's important and selling services based on the idea that it's important. But from my perspective, I think there's so many things we need to worry about first before we get caught up in Web3. It's different if you're working in the Web3 space. Like if you are at the cutting edge of technology, if you are in those kinds of user groups and you're working for a blockchain organization, then yeah, you should be really worried about this and really involved in it. But from my side, for 90% of communities out there today, you haven't got the fundamentals in place. There's so much more improvement you can do before worrying about Web3. So should community builders like upskill? Yes, absolutely. But they should get better at data analytics. They should get better at design and UX. They should get better at understanding the psychology of members. They should get better internally building a strategy and communicating that strategy and gaining support. I'm just not where other people are when it comes to Web3.
That's like, you can hear me, right? That's like sigh of relief, actually, because I'm everywhere I go, people talking about Web3 communities. It kind of makes me think that, like, what am I missing out? Am I like understanding it wrong? I'm sure like one of the members, I mean, here, the attendees, Biswajita, like we kind of discuss every other day, thinking ourselves like, what are we doing good? Like, where are we standing? So kind of when you said this, it makes a lot of sense. And I do agree with you on that aspect as well, that first we need to basically try to understand the basics of community, then we need to understand the data, understand more about the users, because I see a lot of community builders not doing that, because over a period of time, they just, after 50 members, they just don't care who the community members are, and they're not even trying to connect, because the connection with the members is like, forever is a process in community. So yes, I mean, like, if possible, if I have two more hands, I'm going to just give you thumbs up for that or what.
I think part of the problem is that you can get a lot of attention by making really bold claims. When you say X is like the future of community, a lot of community professionals are going to listen to you and be like, oh, that's amazing. But the reality is it probably isn't. It'll have some impact. The way that gamification did. Gamification, it has an impact, but it's not massive. I mean, it can help, it can have, some improvements, but it's not a game changer in how we do our work. And I think we give a lot of attention to people that make these bold claims, but these people that make these bold claims have nothing on the line. Like once Web3 has moved on, then we move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think if you're doing the work, focus on the things that matter to you doing the work today. That's what I would say.
I think that will be my takeaway also for the day. I have a couple of other questions, Richard.
Sorry to interrupt you, Varu. We are right in the middle of the event. Let's take a quick picture before people start leaving.
Yep.
Okay.
Please go ahead. So shall we just do this? Shall we say Richard and then let's click a picture?
Yeah.
Or FeverBee?
Yeah, FeverBee. Yeah, because it has E at the end. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. So one, on count of three. One.
Give me a second. Can everyone please turn on their camera so we can take a quick group picture? You don't have to be dressed. Just
all good?
Yeah.
Okay, so on count of 1, 2, 3, FeverBee.
FeverBee.
Thank you, Varu.
Thank you, Akash. Yes, back to my questions. We are still in the middle of powerlifting, Richard. So I just, don't want to disturb the process. So there are, asynchronous and synchronous communities that are already existing, or, conversation-based, asynchronous and synchronous conversation-based communities. So, I mean, a lot of misconceptions are there. People are not understanding when to use asynchronous, when to use synchronous, and exactly if you use synchronous, what exactly should you measure? And if you look into asynchronous communities, what are the things that you need to measure? So I would really like to understand from your perspective that where do you think synchronous conversation-based community helps? And where do you think asynchronous conversation-based community helps?
I guess most of my answers to questions that come up like this are kind of the same, which is if people aren't sure whether to take one road or the other, I go to the audience and I ask. I go to the audience and I look at what their preferences are. I go to the audience and have them walk through an example of each and see which they got the most level of satisfaction from. That being said, I think there are certain trends that are broadly in place at the moment. Is that for a support-based community, people want to ask a question and then they want to go away and have lunch and come back and have 5 responses. I think that's pretty clear. When people want to talk about how they feel about a topic, when they want to get to know someone, they don't want to spend a long time coming up with a thoughtful post on a forum. They usually want to participate in more of a chat-based environment, Slack, Discord. Facebook, WhatsApp, those kind of channels where we tend to build real relationships in. Not always, there's a lot of exceptions to this as well, but that seems to make sense. And then there's channels that kind of are on both, like Circle is a little bit of both. Reddit is kind of a forum, but it's actually also quite chatty in its nature as well. So some exceptions to that. So I can't give you a great answer other than I would go to the audience, figure out what they prefer to use for each of the different values that you're offering, and then go with that. But I think forums for when we want to ask a question and get a response, and then more chat-based environments when we want to build relationships, get to know each other, but we don't have to think really carefully about the question or the answer itself.
Makes sense. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Like going and asking your audience is pretty important because where they are, your community stays there. Awesome. This is one question that I, one of my friends actually was asking me that I should definitely go and ask you. So I'm just going to not, skip this one. So which is like more brands and products, are right now stepping into this community realm. So specifically more around B2B also that we are seeing. So what are the trends are you currently looking or coming across when it comes to B2B enterprise level community building? That, you're seeing that all these enterprise B2B companies are basically going around these types of communities. Anything of that sort?
I can talk a little about the platform vendors and some of the technologies. I think there was a trend for a long time with a community to collect as much data as you possibly could and then see if some of that data was useful. Now the reverse is true, where we try to collect as little data as possible, because data is a liability. If you get hacked, the more data you have, the bigger that liability is. And so we've gone from technologies that were kind of trying to consume data to trying to have very clear principles about what data we collect, why we collect, how we get rid of it if we don't want it, those kind of things. And I think that's reflected in some of the trends we're seeing at platforms as well. So at the platform level, we're seeing some of the top communities in the world now developing their own platforms. So Apple and Microsoft now have their own platforms they build their communities on, because at some point, all these hoops of data privacy are just not worth it. It's just making more sense to develop their own platform. I think that's one trend. I think at the very advanced level of the big platforms, Chorus, Salesforce, Insider, those folks, I think we're in a mature market. It's not growing rapidly at the enterprise level. And so they're merging with one another and competing for market share. And I think that means there's acquisitions that are going on, and we're going to be left with 3 or 4 big platforms to choose from. And then any new innovation is going to come from new entrants, 2 people working in a garage or a WeWork or whatever the modern version is, coming up with a completely new way of communicating. That's probably going to come through. But I think at the enterprise level, it's a pretty fix. I think there's some really interesting stuff surrounding the enterprise environment, in how you bring all of the customer interactions into one place, how you sort through them, how you build workflows so they go to the right people. Some of the new technologies, I don't know them that well, but like Console, Orbit, and those folks are doing interesting things in how they add on to the platforms that are already there. I'd imagine that some of these platforms will be acquired by the big platforms at some point, and some won't make it. And then at the very lower level, at like the white label, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, with Circle, Tribe, Mighty Networks, maybe Hybrid as well, I'd throw in there. They're doing kind of interesting things. It'd be interesting to see how they develop over the long term. But I think like data privacy is probably the big one. Bringing all of the interactions into one place, finding out how to solve that is a big one. And then what happens at the low budget level? I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening at the low budget level yet, and no one's really quite figured it out. And I'm also interested in technologies that like aren't taken off that I really like. There's a platform I really liked a while ago called Talkie-Walkie. Someone can just put in the link perhaps, but it was a really interesting way of engaging top members with customers on any not even on a community site, but on a company site. So Talkie-Walkie was interesting. I don't think it's quite taken off, but it's an interesting way. I think there's an opportunity to engage better. I really think there's an opportunity to analyze the results better. I think there's an opportunity to support different kinds of communities more specifically as well.
Interesting. I really like that when you picked up the platforms and shared the trends across. It's true. I do agree with a lot of platforms coming in and trying to solve different types of solution for the enterprise. I do agree on that part. So, is there any best practices that you would recommend for a community manager, like if a community manager or a builder who has to basically get into the enterprise ecosystem to build community, right? So, what do you think should be the best practices that they should be aware of?
You mean in the sense of selecting what platform to use? Is that
Yep.
what you're asking, or how to get a job in that field?
No, no, no. It's not at all related to job. It's basically related to managing and building a community. So if I am a community builder or a manager, and if I'm up for the challenge where I'm going to build a community for a B2B enterprise, organization. So what are the things that I should be mentally prepared, as a community builder?
So if you are selecting an enterprise platform to use, what's the best way of saying this? I think there's a couple of good things to have in place. One is to do the membership projection yourself. So the way that platforms work, and I don't know how much everyone knows about this, is that they don't sell you the platform. They give you a license to use the platform for a fixed amount of time. And the cost is going to be largely determined by how many members you're expected to get. Not how many you actually get, but how many you're expected to get. And it's kind of in the interest of the platform vendor to persuade you to get as many as possible. Because if you get a contract on, say, that level, you're paying for it, no matter whether you reach that level or not. So do a membership projection yourself and be conservative about it. I think that would really help. Two, when selecting a platform, make sure you have a rough idea of the budget to begin with. Like, you shouldn't be comparing Circle and Tribe with, say, Higher Logic, Salesforce, and Chorus, because one is like a 6-figure platform, one is like a 3-figure one. And so the differences there are huge. So you should have a rough idea of what the budget is, so you don't waste your time and honestly everyone else's time with like the process. And then really try to get into the weeds of how the platform works. Speak to people that use the platform and get both the good examples and bad examples. What worked well for them and then what didn't work well for them. When you speak to a platform vendor and ask for references, they will give you people that will say nice things about them because that's what they do. What you want are the people that say the opposite. So you can build a big picture of what's good and bad. And sometimes, like Salesforce, for example, Salesforce is great if you want to integrate everything into one place. It's a nightmare if you're doing everything yourself. It's such a fiddly, difficult platform to use. And they'll tell you you can do anything in this platform, but the reality is it's going to cost you a lot of customization, time, setting up, tweaking it, configuring it. It can be really difficult. I know someone that's spending over 200 grand every quarter just on their Salesforce platform today. It's like ridiculous amount of money to spend. And I think platform vendors are very overzealous in promoting their solution to every option. So just because they can offer groups and a knowledge base and all these things doesn't mean members actually want to use that. I'm betting almost no one on this call today has gone to a brand community and contributed to a knowledge base. Very few people, when they want to participate in a group, they don't do it in a brand community. They do it in WhatsApp or platforms that are natural to them. So make sure you're buying it. An important thing to remember about a platform vendor is that you can always buy more. They will always happily sell you more of their product. They'll always do that, but you can't downgrade. It's very hard to downgrade a contract that you've signed. So be quite conservative about it. So get the RFP done, really get the good and the negative, really spend time. This is where you should be participating in existing communities out there today. For like CMX is a great place, Community Roundtable, the ComSor Community Club. Find people that are using the platform that you're considering and speak to them. Even if you have to pay them like $50 or $100 for half an hour of their time, that will pay off so much more because you get an honest picture of what's working and what's not working. And then just be aware of what you're paying for. Sometimes you might be loaded with features that you don't need. Other times, just make sure it's important that when you sign that contract, you're ready to go. Like, you don't need to get like another couple of months getting support. Your developers are ready to go. Your designers are ready to go. Like, everyone's ready to go because you sign the contract and you start paying for it straight away. And if it takes you 6 months to get up and running, that's 6 months that you could be paying a huge amount of money for that platform for if you're not ready to go. So there's a lot in that, but hopefully some of that helps.
It does. I mean, like alongside that, I would also like to add that, if you all have not checked Richard's like a comprehensive timeline of, how the launch of community looks like. So that's like, it kind of is very, very helpful for you. I think additionally, I would add that to basically like to any community builder or a manager who's trying to like launch a community or something. So Richard, I have, like this is something a little bit out because since you talked about budget, for each and every, department, and since community is an evolving section inside any organization, including an enterprise for that matter. So, I'm sure like, especially me, I've also seen a couple of clients where they are like picky about, should I go for a community because it costs X amount and, things around that. So what is the ROI, if we have to basically talk about an ROI to those people who are thinking about the budget? So what would be the, factors that we need to consider?
I think often people approach getting internal support the wrong way, which is they come up with the idea to have a community that will help them achieve, say, customer support or success or knowledge dissemination in some way or whatever it is. And then they try to persuade important people around them that their goals are important to them. And it's a lot easier to work the other way, which is to first begin reaching out to the senior colleagues that you work with, figuring out what they care about, and then aligning the community to match. And then you're beginning with things they already support. So for me, before I think of having a community, I'd reach out to the people internally. This is why we do the research we do internally, to figure out what do you care about? What metrics do you want to move? What are the kind of things that would make a big difference for you? And then putting that as part of our strategic goals, because then we know that person is going to support it. So we go to each stakeholder, find out what they already support, and then design the community to match. Do they care about call deflection? Do they care about customer retention? Do they care about building an ecosystem of knowledge? Do they care about being seen as more innovative than the competition? So working backwards is a lot easier than working forwards. It's a lot easier to begin with something that people already support than try to persuade them to support something that they don't. So when we talk about ROI, yes, there's a lot of common ROI. If you go to feverbee.com/ROI, there's a lot of metrics and approaches to figuring that out. But fundamentally, if you want support, begin with something people already support. If you already have a community, then I'd start speaking to the stakeholders that care most about the thing that the community is designed to achieve, understand what they support, and highlighting how the community achieves that. I mean, when it comes to proving the value of a community, we've done a range of things. We've almost closed a community down before to prove it. There's a case study I shared a couple of months ago on that. We've done a lot of data analysis to prove what the value of a community is. One of the things we're doing with clients at the moment is getting their customer database and the community database, matching them together, and then proving what the impact of a community is. Do people that participate more? Do they spend more? Do they stick around more? Can we do a study? But that involves a bit more of a statistical knowledge to do that, but it's so worthwhile doing. So there isn't an easy answer. There's a lot of clever phrases and words that you can use, but fundamentally you got to find out what people support at the moment and then align your messaging and communications to match.
That's true. I totally agree on that piece where alignment of, what exactly you're looking for in a community and that purpose actually circles back to the purpose and what you would want to achieve from there makes a lot of sense, Richard. So I'm not going to take more time. There's like one last question that I'm going to ask you before we end this session, which is like, so let's say there are a couple of community of, experts in a community, right? Like it can be any experts, but, there are some sort of experts within a community. So it so happens that, the conversation among those experts or the conversation from the experts, seem to like dip or dim in a period of time. So what do you think should be a tactic in order to relaunch that conversations among those experts within a community?
So let me make sure I understand this. So you've got some experts that have joined a community, they haven't been participating yet, and you want them to be more active in sharing their expertise.
Exactly.
Okay. So there's two ways of thinking about this. One is the easy way, one is the hard way. So the easy way of doing it is to think about, where do people share expertise now? Like where do they go to share their knowledge and expertise? Most of the time, honestly, it isn't in a private online community. Because what people, when they share expertise, want is often build a reputation, more followers, more likes, have a bigger impact, and build their own profile upon that. So the easiest way of doing it is to help them, is to promote them where they're building their expertise on their blog, Twitter, TikTok, whatever channel, YouTube or whatever, and provide them with all that, and then aggregate that content in your community today. That's the easy way of doing it, because then they win and then you win as well. Most people don't like that recommendation because they want to have this control place where people are sharing expertise within a defined like box of their platform. You know, this is their platform in that box, and they want more expertise in that box. And so then you've got to tell a really compelling story. Like, why should people share expertise within that community instead of anywhere else? And that might be that only some people get to do it. So you might only allow one contribution, one expert article a month, and then everyone wants to be that expert article a month. If you look at, say, projectmanagement.com, a great community for people that are project managers today, but there's a scarcity. If you get your template or your resource accepted there, then that means something. So being the gatekeeper is a really interesting story to tell. Having an official endorsement is also a really interesting story to tell. Like if you create an article, we'll select the best ones. That is an official endorsement that we're going to promote elsewhere. But there's no clever language. The fundamental challenge here is, why would they? How do you make the cost of doing it so small compared to the rewards of doing it? When you understand that people share an expertise, usually want to reach as many people as possible, and they want to feel a sense of validation from that, then you can either aggregate what they have outside of the community and help them build their following, their audience. That would really help. Or inside, you've got to act as a gatekeeper. You've got to create this amazing story of exclusivity, of scarcity, of authority, of being the verified expert according to this organization. That can work. As a last resort, you can rely upon rewards and those kind of things. That can help as well. I wouldn't typically do that. But fundamentally, yeah, it's about really coming up with that compelling story and then living that story as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, I do understand when it comes to, when you said that reward should be the last resort, because, you know, that may not actually last long. It's something that I always try to tell people. Recognizing, you should be very careful about what effort you recognize. And you should also, because that rewarding is like, should be kept in a way where people should feel that they should achieve that and what they need to do. So I do agree on that part specifically. And when you said, you know, if they win, you win, you know, that should be one's mentality also, Richard. Like, you know, when you see, yeah.
Let me give you an example of rewards I think really work. So a while ago, we were working with a community where people were sharing videos with one another. It's a video-based community. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a video-based community. And for the top members, what we decided to do was have a top expert in like creating these videos, give a short training course just for the top members of the community. And they absolutely loved it because it was exclusive. Only they got access to this training course. It was a sponsorship by us, so we're verifying them as the people that deserve this. And then as a result, not only did they create more videos afterwards, but the quality of the videos was a lot better. And then more people wanted access to this training. So there's a standard that they had to get up to. And so the best rewards often help people be better at what they're already doing. And that's interesting because it feels like it's more work for them. Actually, they want to get better. They like that feeling. And people don't work for free. You're paying them in a feeling they can't get anywhere else. That validation, being helpful, building an audience, these kind of things. Like you're paying them in feelings they can't get from anywhere else. And so finding the right story and the rewards to match that is a critically important thing to have in place. And if you get that right, everything else is a lot easier.
Totally agree, Richard. I mean, I can't begin to thank you for, you know, coming and answering all the questions patiently, because I think I have been asking you way too many questions that are pretty serious. I'm sure all of them would have felt that, dude, you said it's casual conversation and it ended up to be like extremely serious. But having said that, like one last thing, if you would give us advice. Yes, Akash.
Sorry to interrupt you, Varu. We have a few questions, like just after this question of us, we have a few questions from the folks, and can we take them up?
Okay, there are like 77.
No, I have them saved. I have them saved.
Okay, cool.
Okay, we can do it after the question. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem. So now, just one tip or suggestion you would basically like share, or possibly a motivational quote for all the community builders out there, something that will actually boost their morale. What would that be?
A motivational quote? I don't know. I don't have something I can come up that's off the top of my head. What I would say is that community is like, it's hard work, you know, but make sure you understand what your members want, really understand what they want, and work with the preferences they have today. If you do that, everything else is a lot easier. And not only that, the value, honestly, the value that you can create in a community where everybody's sharing their own piece of advice is unlike anything else. And that's what really motivates me, seeing the results, seeing the number of people that community helps. That feeling when you brought like hundreds, thousands, even millions of people together is unbelievable. And that's, I think, is the most motivational thing.
Thank you. I'm just gonna write it and then print it in front of my work desk for sure.
Yeah, I'll create a small recording of this,
Yes,
and yeah, I'll definitely share it with everyone.
Yes, please go ahead with the questions, Akash.
Yes, so the first question that we have is from Sai Manoj. It's, what was exactly dev engineer?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
What exactly is a DevRel engineer? Is that your question? That's the question, right, Sai Manoj?
Yes, absolutely. A developer engineer.
I don't know. It's not really my field of expertise. I mean, as I understand, a dev engineer will develop software and products, but I do community work, so dev engineering, I wouldn't be the expert to ask. I wish I could help more, but it's just not my field of expertise, unfortunately.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the next one we have is from Praveen. It's kind of a big question. Can you give me instances and practices to building resilience amongst communities? Like, how important do you think resilience of communities matter?
Yeah, I think the challenge to that question is, what do you mean by resilience? Do you mean where the members themselves are resilient in difficult situations, or do you mean when the community survives for the long term? Member resilience goes into a field I can't pretend to be an expert in, and I don't want to pretend. But how communities survive over the long term is really understanding what the trends are in the future and being prepared for them. There's a lot of uncertainty about what new technologies will emerge and how they would emerge and those kind of things. What I would recommend doing is always having an idea of what's on the cutting edge of the technology space, what's on the cutting edge of how people are changing and the preferences of those members, and making sure as much as possible you incorporate them, even when it's difficult. When companies or communities die, it's because they didn't adapt quickly enough to trends. And you can see trends now, like social media might be going really big. You might be losing members to a new platform, and it might be really difficult to move to a platform that members like more. But if the trend is going in that direction, you might have to adapt. So just being very aware of what's on the cutting edge of each of the trends and how important members are, or how important that is to members is quite important. How we make members more resilient. I mean, a psychologist is probably a better option for us to make question to than me. It's also a really big topic, I think. So sorry, I can't give a good answer on that.
No, that was a really good answer. The next one we have is a question that almost every community manager has. How do you deal with the burnout?
Burnout. So burnout's a really interesting topic. And I think there's two types of burnout. There's one burnout is when you don't take a break when you should. Have you ever seen the show Lost, like the TV show Lost? No?
No.
Okay. So there's like a show, in like the show Lost, there's a point in the show where someone is expected to like push a button every 2 hours or so, or the world will end. That's like a kind of extreme example, but a lot of community professionals treat their community like that, where if they don't check in their community every 2 hours or 3 hours at weekends, on holidays or whenever, push that button, they think that the big calamity will occur, and that'll be a really bad thing. The reality is the odds of something so bad happening on your day off are pretty much zero. The odds of you burning out from checking on your community every single day are pretty high. And so you've got to be comfortable to be like, even in the worst case scenario, it's recoverable. Unless you're working for an absolutely massive brand. I mean, we talk about Microsoft, that doesn't have a moderation team for some reason, then take time off when you need it. That's one type where you don't give yourself a break, similar to any other type of work. The other type of burnout is more interesting to me, which is when you are not passionate about what you do, where you don't feel you're making a big enough difference, where you don't know what the goal or the purpose of what you do, where you're not fully aligned to achieving that, where you don't feel you've got the right level of skills or the ability to do that. And that's a strategic challenge as much as it is a personal challenge. If you're going into a community and you're doing the same thing today that you did 1 year ago, then you're not going to be very, very motivated. That's going to lead to burnout because you're just not motivated. But if you know what your goal is today, what your goal is for this week, or what your goal is for this month, and if you feel supported and you've got the skills to achieve it, then you're going to be really driven to achieving it. And you can work really hard without feeling burnout at all. So burnout is very symptomatic of either not being able to give yourself a break when you should, because you've had this fear that a calamity will happen when it honestly won't. Or on the other side is that you don't feel that purpose, and yet you are driven towards that purpose. And that's a solvable issue if you get the strategy right, if you speak to members, if you really understand what they want, and you're driven towards that.
Yes.
Hopefully that.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think that answers a question that most of the community managers want to get an answer to, but don't ask often. So the next question we have is from Chitra, but I think we already covered it. How do existing community managers upskill to adapt for Web3 communities? But we have, I think, covered it in the question that Varu asked. So,
let me take that back. Let me take that back a different level, because like Web3, obviously, I'm a bit skeptical of that. I mean, I'm sure it's very important for some groups. I think how do community managers upskill is an interesting question. And I think there's a lot of great courses around. I mean, we do courses, ComSol do courses that will teach you a lot to get you to a high level. I think at a certain point, you need to specialize in a role. Specialize, are you an operations person? Are you more of a customer support person? Are you a customer experience person? Or, are you an analytics and a data person? And that's where you can start taking courses along there. Like even right now, there's a course that I'm taking on web development that's really interesting to me. But every year I try to complete a couple of courses because I think you can learn new skills. And I think there's a lot you can learn on the job, and that's great. But at some point, you need to know what you don't know. And that's where you can go to a high level of taking a specific course for that.
So thank you, Richard. That was really insightful. So for the next question, I hope we're not exceeding the time. How often do you think you need to redesign and reevaluate the community strategy?
It's kind of the same, 6 months to a year. A year seems to be the standard, but a year, a year be my answer. It varies, but a year I think is a good time.
Okay, this is, I think, a really good question for Indian ecosystem. It's from Suhas. From the Indian ecosystem, is there anything that you're tracking, anything that looks interesting to you, as when seen in from global outlook?
What's really interesting in the global outlook?
Richard, maybe I'll just add some context there. You're probably one of the proficient voices in community, and all of us have been following your work. So thank you for everything you do. The question was stemming from the fact that here in India, lots of interesting communities coming up. Community management is coming to the fore, given maybe Web3 or Web2, right? In both spaces, I think community is coming to the fore. But when you look at it from the global perspective, very candidly, I know this is recorded, but very candidly, do you even see, from a global viewpoint, does India even come up on the radar? And if it does, what's exciting?
I think the question is hard because I don't have a global viewpoint at all. The viewpoint I have is European, North American, and brand communities that are customer support, customer experience. So I can't pretend to understand the whole global viewpoint at all. The trends I'm seeing is communities just being deeply integrated. It used to be a community was a separate place you'd go to. You know, there would be a website, and the part of that website would be a community, and then you go to that community to connect with other customers or people in some way. I think now it's being more integrated. And I think that's probably the biggest trend I'm seeing, is that there's an integration now. Community isn't a separate team with a separate set of results, with a separate line of work or whatever. I think it's just more deeply integrated to the products, to the business, to the goals of the organization. And I think the more integrated we are, the better. But it's a challenge because it means the priorities are different. But integration is probably the biggest trend I'm seeing. And there's small things as well, like new community groups that are coming and going and all that. But yeah, integration is probably the biggest thing.
Okay, just one last question that we have. It's from Sangeeta. How can community and product team work together for a mature product?
So the question is, how can a community team work with a mature product?
No, how can the community team and the product team work together for an already mature product?
Yeah, so I'll take a kind of broader answer on that. I think communities are an eternal spring of insights about what customers want in a product every single day. And like a spring, a lot of those insights just flow away and never be captured at all. And that is a tragedy that's happening because a lot of the insights just aren't being used. And so a couple of things I look out for is what questions are most popular within a community? Because if you're managing a product of any kind at all, imagine having a list of questions ranked by how popular, how many people visit that question that you can see every single day. That should prioritize you, what you work on next. You can also see what solutions are being proposed. So you can figure out how people are solving that problem today and then how they can incorporate that in the product. That's really interesting. You can see exactly which terms people are searching for in a community. That's really interesting and should be fed back to the product. You could even create a criteria. So after X number of views or visits or clicks or likes or comments, it gets directed to a product manager to resolve the question and to put that into the development space as well. There's some interesting stuff with ideation where people are voting upon what ideas they like, and that's kind of interesting. But really it's about taking the data that's already out there and getting product managers to look at it and look at it at the right time. And also going to product managers in the first place and be like, what kind of insights do you want? What would be a game changer for you? And then seeing if the community can deliver that. I think that's really interesting and really exciting.
Yeah, thanks so much, Richard, for answering all the questions.
Can I ask a question to you?
To me or to Varu?
To everyone here, I'm kind of interested because I haven't spoken to an Indian group before, right? Or primarily Indian group, and every group is different and interesting. I notice when I speak and answer a question, a lot of people shake their heads. And to me, that's usually when they disagree with what I'm saying. And I'm wondering if there's a different interpretation in India that I should know about, because I'm really interested in this.
Richard, I'll probably take this, given I just moved back from Europe. I was there for 3 years, and I can assure you this is an Indian thing, because we definitely nod in agreement. But when I did this back there and I was working with a large organization, the first few times my teammates was like, okay, do you want to say something? Do you have something that you're disagreeing with us? So yeah, it's definitely a cultural thing where
I've been wondering this for an hour.
I'll give you the reason behind why we nod. Okay, so basically, like we just want to know that acknowledging someone when someone is saying something, you're not just sitting right next to them right now. You know, you're in a different part of the world. I'm in a different corner. Yeah. And, you know, if I have to basically say something while you're talking, the only best way to know is like, I'm nodding my head. And I feel that, you know, it kind of gives them the feeling that, yes, we are listening. And it's not just the feeling, but we are also listening. So that is one of the reasons why we nod our heads. I'm sorry, I think I did that a lot. I do it a lot.
Yeah, I was seeing a lot. Like for us, we like nod our head and then we shake our heads when we disagree. Like we just like, no, wrong answer, wrong answer. And I was seeing so many people do this in this talk, and I'm like, wow, I'm not doing well today. This is a tough session.
No, that's just what we do. Like when we're listening to someone or when we're talking. Yeah. When we disagree, we do this.
Awesome. And let me also just say thank you so much for doing this. I know I had to do it from a hotel room here in Jerusalem, so it's not the setup I would have usually done. But thank you so much. It's been great to speak with you. I really love seeing all the innovation that's coming out of India and elsewhere. So thank you so much for the fantastic questions. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be able to do this.
Same here, Richard. Thank you so much for taking your time and then answering all of our questions like patiently, and also specifically thanks to all those who asked the questions today in the session as well, because the session could have gone in a different direction, but all the questions kept the session like in one particular box, in one array. So thanks to all of them for that, and also for attending this session. And I would also like to thank a few of them who are here, who are very close to me, Biswa and Chitra. Like, I was very nervous that I'm going to talk to you, and they were actually supporting me and then saying, hey, you will just do it fine and things like that. So to them, and also my founder, Deepak. So he has also been very instrumental in terms of like whatever I do, he kind of supports me. So to everyone who has been there, thank you so much. Thank you, Akash, for being an amazing co-host.
Yeah. Thank you, Varu, for agreeing to host this. And once again, thank you, Richard, for agreeing for this. And thank you, everyone, who joined today's 5th episode of Chronicles of Community Builders.
Thank you, and have a great week ahead, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.